Welcome to Unlocking Human Potential with me, your host, Andy Hosgood, a podcast dedicated to exploring what really takes psychologically, behaviourally and practically to help humans thrive through conversations with leaders, founders, coaches, behavioural experts and people shaping how humans perform and grow. Is this for you? But if you're a leader, a founder, a business owner, an ambitious professional who wants to do more than just perform, they want to grow, inspire, bringing the best out of yourself and the people around you, then the mission is simple: to explore how individuals and teams unlock potential in themselves, in others, and the organisations they shape. Each episode is a deep but relaxed conversation built around three core questions. How do we optimise ourselves? How do we unlock potential in others? And what's the best advice that our guests can give to you, the listener? So now over to this episode. I really hope you find it helpful and insightful. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
Great to see you. So welcome to the Unlocking Human Potential podcast with me, Andy Hosgood, and our guest today, Sarah Davies. So, Davies, forgot that Davies.
Well, I say Davis.
Davis, okay.
But it is spelled Davies. So.
Right, we'll go with Davis. Okay. So today I'm joined with Sarah Davies, an integrative psychotherapist, trauma specialist, and the founder of the Rosemay Practice in Bristol. Sarah's path into this work began as a paediatric nurse, where she saw how the deeply emotional experiences shape physical health and human performance. That insight led her into psychotherapy, specialising in EMDR and the internal family systems, helping people heal from trauma, anxiety, burnout, and the unseen pressures that hold capable humans back. Her belief is beautifully simple: every person already carries the resources to change. The role of therapy and leadership is to create the conditions where those resources can emerge. Sarah's worked with adults, adolescents, and high performers who want more than just to cope, but want to feel alive, grounded, and connected. She's passionate about how trauma, attachment, and self-awareness influence the way we show up at work, in relationships, and in life. And in this conversation, we're going to explore how she optimizes herself, how she helps others unlock resilience and confidence, and the practical lessons leaders can use to build psychological, safe, human-first cultures. So if you care about emotional intelligence as much as strategy, then you're going to love this episode. How did that sound?
Great.
Happy with that?
Brilliant. Just put that everywhere.
Well, we'll be sticking that in the show notes. Yeah, you can use that. So no, thank you very much. You know, you were one of the first guests that was introduced to me. You know, Richmond Stance, after a podcast, says, listen, you've got to get Sarah on. We had a brief chat, and then I did a deep dive into that. And yeah, I have to generally say, I'm really, really excited to have this conversation. I love your approach. I love the way you talk around these things. So if I could just start with, you know, why the work that you do matters to you right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. That's a really good question. So I guess why it matters is because I think for me, definitely people matter. You know, our whole world is based on relationships, and we survive in relationships, but we can also thrive in relationships. And so, and I don't, you know, when I say relationships, I don't just mean partner relationships, but relationships at work, relationships with, you know, friends, family, relationships we have with food, with the environment. There are you know, we're in relationship with everything. And I guess the trauma work really matters to me because I don't think there are many people in the world that are untouched by some sort of trauma. And by trauma, I mean what's left behind. So the negative beliefs that we carry about ourselves because of experiences we've had in life. So the experiences are part of it, but they're not all of it. It's the work that I do really is centered around what that means for you and what are you carrying as a result of it in terms of beliefs about yourself or the world.
Wow. Okay. I'm really looking forward to diving into that. Just before we dive into that, which is going to hopefully is going to be a lot of the conversation, because there's a lot of things that you've taken from that that kind of does spark my interest and definitely the
Mhm.
listeners' interest. What's something you're curious about right now? What is it that you're at the moment in time that's got your attention or you're curious about?
Work-wise,
Whatever, where you can take that wherever you want to.
okay. What am I curious about? I am curious about individual relationships with ourselves. So I think a lot of the focus in in my area of work is always on how we communicate or relate to others. But I guess my interest is in firstly, how do we communicate or how are we in relationship with ourselves?
Which leads us brilliant on to our first topic. So this podcast is in three themes. How do we get the best out of ourselves or unlock the best version
Mhm.
of us?
Mhm.
And then how do we take that and how do we then help others? So it might be if you're a leader, how do we unlock potential in others? It might be a coach or a mentor or a therapist, and how do you get the best out of others? And then we're going to wrap it up with kind of what advice we can give to the listeners. Because for me, it's great having a really good conversation, but it's the so what? What do we then, what can a
Yeah.
listener do with this? So can we explore that then? So, when we're talking around unlocking our own potential, negative beliefs, and I'm sure everyone listening to this has kind of had the conversation with themselves where they've that's creeped in. So can you just explore that for me? Where does that come from and what do we do about it?
Yeah, so I mean, negative beliefs come from experiences that we have in life. And, we as human beings try to make meaning from things. So we attach meaning to our experiences. And especially if those experiences happen when we're small and they can be negative experiences, that doesn't mean that something's necessarily happened to you, but it can also be things that didn't happen. So things that you needed that you didn't get. And that can be in relationship to our caregivers or the environment, safety, things like that. So the experiences that we have will then often lead to us trying to attach meaning to it. And that meaning, when we're small, is often about ourselves.
Okay.
Because if you have caregivers that are letting you down, psychologically, it's far more detrimental to believe that they are the problem because you're
Right.
depending on them for survival. So if we make it about them, that's a bigger problem for us. If we make it about us, then it gives us the illusion that we are the problem and that the caregivers are still okay because we're depending on them. Does that make sense?
Makes an awful lot of sense and it's what made me smile when that is because I'm assuming when we're talking when they're in childhood.
Yep.
So again, that's an instinct rather than there's how much thought process is going. Oh well, there's none.
Mm.
Is that I'm assuming that's just a habitual instinct that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, we are hardwired for survival, and in order to survive, we need to maintain attachment. Without somebody taking care of us, a newborn baby can't survive in the world if no one's going to take care of it.
Yeah.
We are born quite prematurely in that sense. And so yeah, so this is unconscious. It's not that we're sat there, at
Yeah.
5 days old going, oh, I can't cry because it really upsets my parents.
Yeah.
It's just that we get messaging, we learn things from the behavior that other people have in relationship to us. And we'll then attach meaning to that. And often that meaning is something about us, like I'm unlovable or I'm not good enough or I'm not safe. I can't trust anyone. These are all kind of negative beliefs that we carry. And we don't all, they're not all the same for everybody, but they're quite general ones that I think most people can probably relate to on some level.
And are you okay if we just explore that a bit deeper?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So I guess selfishly then looking at it from the world of a parent
Hmm.
and the be short of parents, thinking, oh gosh, okay. So what what am I doing well or doing less well,
Mm-hmm.
to ensure that I am, yes, I am a business owner and coach and all the other things and healthcare professional. But ultimately, my goal is being the dad, and my mission is to be the best I can potentially be. So, if there's parents listening, what could they do to kind of help support their children with
Mm-hmm.
these as in their development?
Yeah, okay, it's a really good question. And I'm a parent and I don't always get it right. So I think
Okay.
that's number one, that I think that's really important to stress is that there is no kind of perfect parent. There is no we're gonna screw up. That's the
Yeah.
nature of being human, that we are flawed. And I think you have to accept that if you want to be part of humanity and part of the club,
Yeah.
then you have to accept that we aren't perfect and that we are flawed. But the first thing that, or the most important thing that I would say to any parent is do the work on yourself.
Okay.
Okay. And what I mean by that is often as parents, we find our children's suffering unbearable. And so what we'll try to do is fix that. And it's not really what they need. And what we're trying to do when we fix, and this is true of most things in life, okay, if we see suffering and we want to just jump in with answers or solutions or to the problem, we're trying to rescue ourselves from the uncomfortable feeling of sitting with somebody else's suffering. So it's about serving us as much as it is about serving them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, a lot.
So if you can get comfortable with the uncomfortable, you're going to parent a lot better because you're going to be able to tolerate the inevitable feelings and emotions that come up for our children: anger, sadness, frustration, disappointment, jealousy, all of those feelings that we experience. If you can tolerate them, you're going to be able to hold the space for your child to tolerate them as well. And in that experience, you're teaching them not only that you're helping to regulate that state for them, but you're also saying it's okay,
Okay.
that these feelings are okay. Like you don't have to run away from them. You don't have to push them down, that it's acceptable. That doesn't mean you tolerate like bad behavior,
Yeah.
but it
Okay.
means, yeah, okay, so
Yeah. There's
there's a
difference.
difference
Yeah.
between, yeah, accepting, kind of negative behavior. But it is by saying, okay, I can tolerate what you're feeling, and I'm not going to try and fix it for you, but I am going to hold the space for you to also tolerate this. Because these are things that you're going to have for the rest of your life. You can't go through life running away from sadness or the feeling of disappointment or heartbreak, um, loss, grief.
And just on that, is that something you would suggest that if there is a parent listening to
Mhm.
this and is that something that you actually articulate? So instead of just holding the space, you would explain to them why you're doing that. Would that be helpful?
Depends on the age of the
Okay.
child, I
Yeah.
think, but if you do it from the get-go, they'll be used to you being able to hold that space. So naming the emotion, I mean, Dan Siegel is brilliant. I'd recommend any parent to look at him. But he's got this kind of I don't know what you would call it, not like slogan, but it's this uh thing that he says, which is name it to tame it. So if
Okay.
you can help your child name the emotion, then it will help to regulate the nervous system.
Okay.
Okay, so often kids will experience things and they don't know what, especially if they're really small. Okay, you've said no because they're not allowed something. I don't know, they want a lollipop and you're about to serve tea,
Yeah.
right? And you've just said no, you're not having a lollipop. They're going to have feelings about that. They're going to be angry or they and sad because I want the thing that you're not letting me have. So I feel like maybe out of control as well. Like I have a lack of control over my autonomy because I want the
Yeah.
lolly. They wouldn't know this,
Yes. Yeah.
they're small, but they might then have some sort of temper, tantrum or express that feeling that they are experiencing, and they don't necessarily know why they're having that feeling or what the feeling is. So by you saying, that I get that it must be really frustrating that I've said no to you, or being able to name the anger, um, or I wonder if you're feeling quite sad, you know, and you can offer it as an invitation
Yeah.
because essentially we don't actually know what they're feeling, only they will know that. And often sadness can present as anger, and anger can present as sadness. So checking out with them what's really going on. Again, this is like age appropriate, so
Yeah.
you're going to have that conversation far better with, a 10-year-old than you are a 3-year-old.
And I guess my last question on this then, is there a, so there might be people listening that go, oh gosh, my daughter's 13, for example,
Mhm.
I've not had this. Is there a, even if the people started now, it'd still be
Mhm.
helpful to get familiar, for the kids to get familiar with that in the long term?
100%.
Okay.
There is no age that you can't do this with. So, even if your child's 40,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You could let, because what you're also teaching is communication, and you're modeling. There's a lot of modeling that goes on in parenting. Um, how you show up in the world is how your kids will often show up in the world. And so, yeah, just being mindful of what you're modeling to them. There will be ruptures in relationship with your kids, no matter what you do, there will always be ruptures. And so how good are you at being able to acknowledge the rupture and then make a repair? Because ruptures are going to happen. And actually, ruptures are really important. And we don't really want to get rid of ruptures. What we want to do is get good at building repair.
And when you say ruptures, is that just maybe a misunderstanding, an argument, or how
Yeah.
would you?
Yeah, like a conflict,
Okay.
misunderstanding. I haven't quite got it right. You know, I'm getting really cross with you because I've told you 10 times to put your shoes on and we're going to be late for school, and now I'm losing, my rag. And then, so I didn't handle that the best,
Okay.
maybe. And so that creates a little rupture.
Right.
And so being able to then come back to that, you don't have to do it straight away. You could even come back to it the next day, or even a week later, or even a month later.
Yeah.
But it's by being able to say, hey, that thing that happened, where I lost my temper, or, I said something that I regret, or that maybe I didn't say that in the way that I had intended, because this is what was going on for me, and being able to say what was going on for you, that you were frustrated or angry. And it's not all about them, because underneath that is really, it's not about them not putting their shoes on and you've asked them 10 times. It's that you are feeling out of control.
Yeah.
No one's listening to me, so I'm not heard, I'm not important. This is where these negative beliefs start coming back up.
Yeah. And again, there's two parts to it. There's one, I was thinking why this is so important because one of the things I see a lot with business owners is, you know, I use for my the dad guilt of that,
Mm.
you might be suboptimal in the way you are, and you do sometimes have a rupture, let's call it that, I like that, you know, on the way to school of a morning, and then they go off to school, and then you've got to go to work, and all of a sudden you've got to be, you've got to be able to almost park that emotion, haven't you? And deal with anything that's going on for self, but then go and make some good decisions within the organization. So I think it's important that people recognize that it's normal, and then how to then
Yeah,
kind of counteract that within the world.
yeah.
And you said something there around, and then it's about sometimes the parent or the adult, but like, in the situation, it's their negative beliefs coming up. So let's, for example, somebody has um had this through their childhood, and I'm assuming most have, or all have. Would we even go as much to say? We've got,
Um, I mean, I think it's highly likely that at some point there has been an experience like this for most people.
yeah. So and I guess, depending on their upbringing and their environment, it is. I guess there's a scale to that, isn't there?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So even those that would say I've got the ideal, perfect
Hmm.
childhood, or some would describe it. there are going to some of those just because of the, like you've said, the unconscious choices that we make in those informative years, and then they start to kind of appear when
Mm.
maybe with members of staff or our children, so how can you explore that for people listening of what does that mean? What can they do with that? Is there anything you'd like to take that pathway down?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I want to say is that, you know, being able to recognize what is going on for you is really important. So like when you said that that might have happened in the morning, then you've got to go to work. And um, I think just being able to allow that feeling that you're now taking into work rather than trying to push it down or shove it somewhere and then get on with the rest of your day, it's probably not going to be very effective because what usually happens is when we try and get rid of a feeling or an emotion or a belief about ourselves, it gets louder. So imagine it's like a bit like a little toddler, when you're having a conversation with another adult and the
Yeah.
toddler wants your attention and they start tapping you on the leg and you're kind
Yeah.
of like, you ignore them and you just carry on in conversation and then they start whacking it a bit harder. And the more you ignore, the louder their tantrum gets. And then all of a sudden, they're having a full-blown meltdown on the floor, and now you can't ignore it. And everyone's attention is brought to that.
Yep.
That's the same kind of thing, right?
Okay.
So, and it's like this is where the internal family systems language that we use in that comes in because it's we talk about parts of us. So there might be a part of you that is going into work that morning that has been feeling angry or frustrated. I'm not a good enough parent. I didn't get them to school on time. Nobody listens to me. These are all things that are going on for like different parts of us. But there might be another part of you that's like, park it. We've got work. I've got to get my business head on. I need to be professional. And so you're going to find a conflict internally between these parts. So it's not just about rupture and repair externally that we do with our relationships, but also what happens for us internally. So I guess the first thing I would say is just allow some space to recognize what it is you're feeling and let that part of you know that you get it. Like, okay, I get why I would be feeling frustrated. I get why I would be feeling not good enough. But it's not my children that have made me feel that way. I already carry that. That it's just that the behavior has triggered that part of me. It's like a wound that nobody can see, and someone brushes past it and it really hurts. But they don't know they've hurt you because they can't see it.
Mhm.
But then you respond from this place of wounding, of hurt, and it doesn't match. It's like out of proportion. That's kind of what we mean by when we say someone's been triggered. Um, and so yeah, so having that conversation with yourself, internally to be able to say, I get it, that I would be feeling that way, and I'll come back to you, I'll come
Yeah.
back to you. But I just need a little bit of space so that I can get through the day, and do all the things that I need to do professionally. And I will spend some time with the anger, frustration, sadness, hurt, whatever it is that's come up for you. Letting that part of you know that is enough, just like the toddler. Can you give me a minute? I'm just going to finish my conversation, but I will be with you. Just that acknowledgement is enough to just settle them down a little bit so
No,
that,
I love
yeah,
that. Yeah.
gives you a bit of space so that you can be present and with work. Otherwise, you're just going to go in and project all of that stuff that's happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And then that email hasn't been sent or something's not gone right and you're already feeling, unimportant, not good enough, nobody, you can't trust anyone, whatever it is that's come up for you, you're then going to be like projecting all of that onto this little thing that has just happened.
yeah. No, I can well and truly imagine. And I love this because I've done a lot of this, and it's a conversation. So I'm smiling with this because that is the conversation I do have on a semi-regular basis with myself. So for those people that kind of unfamiliar with the family systems and the parts. Can you
Hmm.
just explain that a little bit for people? Because I think it's a really powerful kind of tool. I'm just curious if you could just share some insights around that.
Yeah, so internal family systems is based on the idea that we have multiple aspects of our personality. So, there is a part of me that can be really professional, and there's a part of me. I guess the easiest way to kind of think about parts is, you're sat on the sofa and there is, the fire's on, and you've also planned a gym session. And so there's a part of you that's like, I really need to get to the gym because I really want to, do this thing that I've committed myself to do. And the other part of you is like, I really can't be bothered. I just want to lie on the sofa, right? So everyone can kind of relate to those kind of experiences because that happens for most people. We're in, and I guess we would call that like a polarization. So one part wants to do something and the other part is against it.
Yeah.
So using language like, "Oh, part of me wants to go to the gym, part of me can't be bothered, part of me wants to go out tonight, and the other part thinks it's raining, I just want to stay in." Yeah, so if you
Yeah.
so parts work is just around being able to identify these different kind of parts of us. And then in therapy, if you're using it in therapeutically, we look at that in terms of their roles, so what the part is doing for you. So we have categories, so protectors, and they are subcategorized into managers and firefighters. So manager would be a part of you. For example, if you have a negative belief that you're not good enough, there might be a part of you, which would be we would call a manager, that's really driven to proving yourself in every aspect of your work. So you overwork, or you're a workaholic, or you really have to get the maximum out of everything that you do because you're trying to prove you're good enough. Okay, so that would kind of be a
Mm.
manager. They have a role, they're trying to serve you. They're always in service of you. It's just being able to identify their intention over their impact, because the intention of that part that's pushing you to work harder is because we don't want you to feel not good enough. So this part's like, I don't want you to feel not good enough. So I'm just going to push you and drive you to work better and harder. The impact of that then is potentially, I don't have enough time with my kids or my wife or, my friends. I don't get to go to the gym. So I negate all of my other needs in order to push this um, desire not to feel not good enough. So the impact is different from the intention, but with parts, it's really important to just notice their intention. Because if we look at their intention, then we can have kind of compassion, and there's a bit more clarity around what they're doing for us. And that is going to build your relationship with that part of you, rather than if you focus on the impact, which can often be negative, it's not always, but it can be. That's going to lead to rejection of that part, or I don't like that part of me that overworks. I don't want that part. And that, again, if you manage pushing a toddler away from you all the time, it's going to try and cling harder and tighter to you.
Mm. Yeah, it's really, really interesting, isn't it? And I guess for those listening, how would that how will that part maybe manifest itself? Is it a feeling normally? Is it, and then it's time to. So what went on for me when you were saying that was
Mhm.
I can imagine an emotion.
Mhm.
I can imagine then the voice in my head
Mhm.
starting to kind of volume go up. And then as you were talking about almost looking at the intention behind the part, almost that internal dialogue of going, okay, cool. What are you trying to tell me? That was the
Mm.
kind of that was as you were saying that was the question that was going, what are you trying to tell me? And what's the positive almost intention behind what you're trying to tell me?
Yeah.
Are you trying to protect me from because you know that, like you said, if I keep going down this path, I'm going to end up working really, really late, and then I'm going to go into bad dad mode or whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
Is that, have I interpreted that kind of correctly?
Yeah. So, I mean, there definitely, I mean, parts can show up. They can manifest themselves in sensations, feelings, thoughts, and they can be in or around your body. So sometimes it can be there's this sense of like this pressure and it's coming from outside, but it's I can feel it on me.
Yeah.
Um, and that will be, that's another version of a power. It might be, I keep getting I've got this persistent pain in my hip, but there's kind of nobody can find a reason for it medically,
Yeah.
um, but it doesn't mean the pain doesn't exist. It's there. I can feel it. So something's going on. So being able to just be with whatever it is you're experiencing and be curious about it. So I really like that, what is it you need me to know? Because that's one of the things that we would ask that part, if we were in a session. It would be, now you kind of acknowledge that part. Is that part aware of you? And, what does that ask that part? What does it want you to know about it? What's it trying to do for you? What does it fear would happen if it didn't do that? How old does it think you are?
Oh,
It's
okay.
another really important one because these parts are often forced into roles, right across varying ages, but often from quite small. So they think that you're quite small because that's where the wound came from. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
so they're
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
always there to protect. This is why they're called protectors, you or your internal system from the overwhelm of the wound. And the wound is the negative belief often.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So many questions. Yeah, no, but I guess then, if you wouldn't mind, so
Hmm.
let's say someone's listening to this and they're aware of those sensations, even like where you described that kind of pressure come from the outside, but they're unfamiliar with taking the time to stop.
Hmm.
And, I've been fortunate enough to have people like surrounded by people like you for the last 20 years who have influenced my thinking. So I wouldn't say I'm good, but I think I'm on the way to becoming good at the
Yeah.
pausing and asking those questions. If someone's hearing this for the first time, what would be your advice then about how to begin developing that skill? I'm
Hmm.
assuming it is a skill to stop and kind of have that conversation with yourself, recognizing what part and asking that part questions.
Yeah, yeah, and this is goes back to kind of what we first touched on, which is how do you communicate and relate to yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's it does sound a bit wacky, as if you're hearing this for the first time, it can sound a bit like, what the hell is she on about? It's like this mumbo jumbo stuff that, there's parts of me and I have to sit with them and talk with them, and there's, sensations going on that, it sounds a little bit out there, but I promise you, if you take the time to just try it out, you will be very surprised at just how like there is a wealth of information in your system that you haven't tapped into, that you aren't aware of. And being familiar and aware of them is only going to be of benefit to you in terms of, and this again, it kind of depends on how you define success. But if, to be anywhere in life, it all starts in here. Um, So if you're not familiar with it, and it sounds really wacky and crazy, you can do this literally any time of day. So even if you're cleaning your teeth, sat in the bath, having a shower, driving the car, I probably wouldn't say meditate whilst you're driving a car, but but just take a minute to just notice. I think noticing is the most powerful thing that you could do, is I'm not going to ignore this thing that's happening for me. I'm just going to notice it. And I'm just going to tell let that part of me know that I've noticed it. like that's as simple as that. Just starting with that is a great place to start. And just notice then what happens? Like, how does that part of you respond? So if it's a sensation, if it's like a tightness in your chest, for example, okay, you're about to come on a podcast and you've got tightness in your chest, yeah, or some butterflies in your stomach. Just noticing that and say, it's almost like an old friend where you would kind of go, "Hey, bud, I notice you. You're here. Like I can feel you, or I can see you, or I can hear you, however it presents to you." And just be curious about how it responds to you. Because often there will be some sort of a change. So it might soften, it might get a little bit more intense, it might be almost a sense of relief that it's been noticed. And then that can lead you on then to inquire a little bit more about it if you have the time. And if you don't, then you can just say, I've noticed you. I get that you're here again. This is very familiar to me. Um, I'm going to be curious about that, but I'm going to come back to it at a later point because I just don't have this time for it now. So that you're setting the intention to come back to that. Um, so just literally just starting off with that is enough to just get familiar with what is going on for me. Because there is a lot probably for most of us going on all the time that we just aren't really aware of or noticing.
And, and as someone who does this, it's so powerful. And like you say, it's things you can be doing anywhere, can't it? Just noticing what you're noticing
Mhm.
and then having that internal conversation. Because we're all having an internal conversation, aren't we? That voice is always there.
Mm.
And it's always, I always use the analogy that I know when mine gets too loud in my head, it's normally
Mhm.
the indicator the dog needs to go for a walk fast or I need to go
Mhm.
training because it helps me kind of regulate the volume of the voice so then I can have a more
Mhm.
logical conversation with different parts.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's a really, and I certainly would encourage anyone listening to this, like you say, just to notice what you notice and just have a go. I think
Yeah.
that's all you can do, isn't it?
Yeah. If you can be playful with it, then I think that's a great place to start from. Um, but yeah, so I'm just noticing that there is a part of you that's trying to manage the volume. Like there's parts and parts. It goes on and on and on. Um,
Yeah, but I use it in coaching a lot. That's why
yeah.
I don't want to make this about me. This is all about you. But I use it a lot to say I'm just curious. If there's another part of you that would give you the answer, what would the part tell you? And the amount of people go, "What are you on about?" And I go, "Just take some time to think about it."
Mm-hmm.
And they go, "Well, it'll probably tell me that." And I go, "Okay, and what would you do with that?" That's
Hmm.
probably a good idea. Okay. So if we ask that part to give a bit more detail, what that part tell you? Well,
Hmm.
probably do that.
Yeah.
And you can just see people going, all right, yeah, that's really helpful actually. And
Yeah.
the answers come within them. I've not had to give it. So, that's why I love
Hmm.
this and why I'm smiling quite intensely at this because I think
Hmm.
it's so powerful and I've seen the power
Yeah.
of it in a coaching thing. Now, obviously, I know you use it in a more therapeutic setting.
Hmm.
Um, just on that, if you could and share with yourself, and this is an assumption.
Hmm.
So that obviously, when I read that out, when you're dealing with people from trauma, anxiety, burnout,
Hmm.
there's an assumption that those people are in maybe less good states when they arrive in practice.
Hmm.
And I know there's going to be healthcare professionals or there's going to be business leaders that are probably dealing with people in less good states in the organizations. How do you keep yourself optimal? You've given
Yeah.
some really good tips around how to keep
Hmm.
ourselves, but is there anything that you do particularly for yourself to keep yourself optimal?
Yeah, I think the first thing when you're dealing with anything, when you're dealing with people, the number one thing is have what are your boundaries like?
Okay.
So I don't think many people really understand boundaries. Um, but getting good with boundaries is a really good place to start because boundaries safety, not just for you, but for a relationship with. So for your clients, if they know your boundaries and you've communicated them, they're going to feel safer and you're going to feel safer. So boundaries is really important. I think also for me, it's getting the balance between work, family. I've got two children, and I'm a single parent. So work, kids, and then me. So going to the gym, I kind of prioritize because it's the only time that I really get around and move my body apart from running around, taking them here, there, and everywhere. It's the only really the time that I get to move my body and taking the dog for a walk. So trying to get out of the house. But I also dip in and out of my own personal therapy. And I think that
Yeah,
that's, as therapists, when we train, we have to be in personal therapy. It's part of the conditions of our training, of our course. That when you qualify, you have to have had personal therapy throughout the um the course itself. So we're really familiar with dipping in and out of our own therapy because it's all, I can't be there for somebody else in the way that I need to be to hold the space if I'm not okay myself. And so
yeah,
it really does all start with you. Um, don't be afraid to just you use those as resources. So just because you're going in to see a coach or a therapist, it doesn't, there's nothing, you're not faulty. It's just that you're trying to be, trying to optimize yourself and how you show up and how you're present with other people. Um, yeah, so those are ways that I really try and keep myself well. Um, and also, because you will get triggered by people. Your kids, number one, are going to trigger the hell out of you. Um, and, clients as well will often, trigger us. And so being able to first of all say, something's going on for me here, and I need to go and look at that. And then saying, right now, I need to go and do something with that because otherwise this is just going to keep showing up for me. Um,
yeah, yeah. I think that's so powerful advice. It's interesting, isn't it, that most people see. I see therapy as a way of self-care.
mhm,
So, there might be a time where, we're recording this in January, which means everyone is tracking calories and giving up alcohol and on their best behavior. Gyms are busy. So everyone is
mm,
now, like you've said there, we're moving, we're doing the right things. We track sleep. You know,
mhm,
I'm from a combat band background where everyone measures the weight and there's always on weight, so they're
mhm.
they're constantly looking at they're looking at what I would call these kind of very physical factors, but that's only a part of it, isn't it? That mental factor, it for me, I've always seen that as a way of going to have a conversation. And someone like yourself, especially if I'm stuck, you kind of ask a question in the way that you ask questions, and I go, oh yeah, that's really old. And sometimes you need that external person, don't you? Just to kind of, just
Yeah.
to get shine light on things in a different way to give you a different perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that is really important because actually healing doesn't take place in isolation. It takes place within a relationship.
Okay.
So being in relationship with somebody else, whether that's your therapist or your partner or, you know, um, your boss, whoever it is, but that's where real healing happens. So in therapy, it's not about the therapist, it's about the relationship that you have with your client, and that takes two people to make the relationship. So again, I think that that's another, I guess that's my approach anyway, is that I invest in the person. I'm investing in getting to know that person and I'm holding space for them. You can apply that to anything. Like if
Yeah.
you're invested in your staff or if you're invested in your partner, then your relationship is going to benefit from that.
No, I love that. Can I just dial back and then we'll move on to unlocking others? You
Mhm.
talked about boundaries. For people who are unfamiliar what that means, can you just shine a bit more light on that for me, please?
Yeah, so boundaries come in all different shapes and sizes and forms. But essentially it's what I think of boundaries as having like if you imagine just standing in a massive open space, like fields and fields for as far as you can see, and there are other people, occupying spaces that you can see. If you are just stood there wide open, that can feel quite vulnerable. If you just put like even just a picket fence, doesn't have to be a massive brick wall, but just a little
Mm.
picket fence around your square of your field, then that automatically creates this sense of safety. Like everybody knows where my boundary is. So if you come up to my picket fence, I can meet you there, I can invite you in. But it's essentially it's on my kind of not on my terms because that sounds quite strong, but it's you're clear on where my boundary line is, and I'm clear on where yours is if you choose to do the same. If I come into your space and you haven't got any good, your boundaries aren't very clear, then I might overstep something and you're going to react. You're going to respond to that because I've crossed the line without knowing it.
Yeah.
That makes me feel quite unsafe. And that other person then is going to feel pretty unsafe as well because you've come into their space uninvited and you weren't aware that you were in their space uninvited. So that creates rupture. This is where
Yeah.
repair comes
Yeah.
in. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so being clear about boundaries, it's not just about physical boundaries, like can I how safe do I feel physically with somebody? But it's being able to keep good time. So a boundary would, another boundary would be, for example, if you've got a meeting at 10 o'clock and you're 5 minutes late for that meeting and you didn't communicate that, that's not very good. It's not very good time boundaries. It's not very boundaried about because with boundaries as well, you're communicating a message. So if I'm late for a meeting, someone might interpret that you don't really care. I'm not
Yeah.
that important to you. This is where those negative beliefs come back in. Okay, because if those negative beliefs didn't exist, they probably wouldn't be thinking that. Like, so everything that we do will be communicating a message to somebody else. How they receive that message is beyond our control. But it is important for us to be responsible and accountable for how we are putting that out into the world. Um, so I've probably not explained that very well, but something like another boundary would be if somebody's talking and you keep interrupting them, that's a pretty weak boundary. Like, so it shows up everywhere. I'm trying to think of some other examples of.
It's I guess for me, I think you have done a good job. If I'm honest, I think one of the things that raised the question in my head was for someone who's listening for the first time and
Mm,
understanding this, how explicit do we need to be with our boundaries? So timekeeping is a classic. I know a friend of mine who it's a real pet hate of his, and actually he will now turn around and say, "Look, we've got a meeting at 10. If you're not there at 10, I'm gone,"
mm,
because that's how much it means to him.
mhm.
I'll give you 5 or 10 minutes, but
Yeah,
and so I'm just curious if someone is doing this because like you said, it can trigger people, but the other
mhm.
person might not realize why they've been
Right.
triggered. So how explicit would you suggest that we'd have to go?
So yeah, I think like when it comes, I think we'll take the meeting thing as a good example because
Yeah,
it's quite easy to play with. But if your community, so that is what I would say is quite a rigid boundary. So
yeah,
we can have really weak boundaries, really rigid boundaries, but we want to be able to have some balance in the middle. And boundaries can be flexible as well. So, if I say no to something and then I change my mind, I think actually, a classic example is if your child's playing up and then, when I say playing up, that's, you know, you know what I mean by
yeah, the
that, but
child.
they're exhibiting a behavior that you deem unacceptable.
Yeah,
Um, and I say behavior unacceptable, not feeling or emotion, because the feeling and emotion should always be acceptable, but the behavior that they're exhibiting might not be
I
acceptable.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So the behavior is not acceptable. and they are, smashing their room apart, I don't know, because you just said they can't do something.
Yeah.
They'd planned to go out with their friends to the cinema. So if you turned around and said, you're now not going to the cinema at 12 o'clock because you've done whatever, you're kind of setting a boundary by saying this behavior is not acceptable. And now there is a consequence to that. Now, actually, if that affects everybody else, then that this
Yeah. Okay.
thing, and you're actually come away from that thinking, oh crap, maybe I shouldn't have gone that hard. I should have just had this conversation with them. Boundaries can be flexible, so you can go back and have that conversation with your child, or it might even be another adult, and be able to say, hey, this behavior wasn't acceptable. I won't tolerate you smashing your room apart, for example.
Yeah.
And I know I said that you can't go to the cinema, um, but I'm gonna, I'm going to say that you can go to the cinema, but under these conditions, or that. I guess I'm not being very clear about this, but
Yeah, but I think but I think that can be applied to lots of things, can't there? I think, if there's leaders, leaders kind of, it all comes down, hearing that. And again, it's my assumption. So please challenge and push back, is that it is just having honest conversations and communication with, how what's going on for you also. So obviously when they've smashed the room up, that conversation of actually that behavior is unacceptable,
mm-hmm.
and this is why this is unacceptable, and the consequence of this is X, Y, and Z. And I guess that could also be members in a team that
Mm-hmm.
may behave, you know, unprofessionally, and you deem that as being unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of ignoring it, it's just being, and especially in teams, I guess it's being brave enough sometimes to have that honest conversation with the intent that a member of staff, if they don't see, I don't know, let's use an example that there's a clinician and they're taking a coffee into into a session, and for the boss they go, oh, that's not very professional that they're taking a coffee in. um they might see that as that's unacceptable behavior, and so therefore wants to either challenge that behavior in a way. Is that kind of an example of where it's explaining why from my viewpoint I see this as unprofessional?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say that was quite rigid again,
Okay,
as
sorry.
in,
Yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah,
that's not to apologize. But I would be curious. So this let me take me out of it for a second,
yeah, it's okay.
because I can go off on one with that. Um, but if that was the example, like I would say that a good boundary then would be to have that conversation with that clinician to say, look, this is my viewpoint, that when you take a coffee into a session, I feel like that doesn't look very professional. And then first of all, I'd be curious around that, like what is not professional about that? Because
Yeah,
actually you're taking a drink into a session
yeah,
and everybody needs to drink. So you're meeting your need,
yeah,
and that's a good model for your client, that they can also meet their own needs. So if they need a drink, they're an adult, they are allowed to drink within a sec. Do you see, depending
yeah,
on the session. But
yeah,
so I would be kind of curious about what's going on for you there.
yeah. I was just trying to be really safe with an example. I thought there was a few examples that were real examples in my head, and I thought
Yeah.
I better not go near that. So I thought
Well,
I'd try and find a really safe one.
yeah. And no, and that is a safer one than, I went to the extreme of smashing your bedroom up.
No, no, but I was thinking of,
Where that
other
came from.
unacceptable behaviors that happen in,
Yeah.
in clinical
Mm.
practice. But it is interesting that, like you've said, and I think what I took from that was also, if it is triggering you, so if you are a leader and someone is taking a coffee into a meeting or into whatever,
Mhm.
or doing something, or leaving a coffee cup on the side, and that's triggering you, it comes back to where we start a little bit earlier on, wasn't it? Of going, okay, so what's going on for me? What part of me is being triggered, and why is that
Right.
being triggered?
Yeah.
And again, is that coming back to where they don't respect me, or they're not respecting somebody else because
Yeah.
they're behaving in such a way, rather than leading with curiosity of
Yeah.
going, just curious. I saw you take a brew in. They went, oh no, yeah, I forgot to put a break in today, and I've not an opportunity to have a
Hmm.
brew all day.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, and I've asked their consent, and they're okay with it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I
Yeah.
missed that piece.
Yeah.
So I guess,
Yeah, and it might be then that the conversation, there might be reasons why hot beverages aren't allowed in that space, because
yeah,
it's not safe. So it might be then, I noticed that you took your coffee in or whatever. For these reasons, that's not going to be okay, but you could take water in,
yeah, okay.
or that's where that flexibility comes in with the boundaries.
Yeah. Or I
And
was even saying the flexibility. Well, actually, what do we need to do better as an organisation to make sure you have a break
Mhm.
so you
Yeah,
can actually be out of that environment and
yeah,
have your cup of tea or your cup of coffee
yeah,
in a nice chilled space rather than
yeah.
having to do it with a client.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's where good conversations come in and being able to communicate that. Because if you don't even communicate the thing in the first place, those conversations won't happen.
And you know, we and listen, this conversation's been amazing, and I generally could talk to you for hours, and I promise I won't. So don't worry. So leaning into then the kind of how we, I love this conversation about optimizing self because, especially in the world that I live in, it's the most important. I always have to make sure that a leader looks after themselves
Hmm.
first
Hmm.
because I believe that them being optimal allows them to make optimal decisions for the business and the team. I think it's a really hard place to look after everybody else if you're suboptimal, in my
Hmm.
opinion, anyway.
Yeah.
So I've loved that, and that's why I've just carried on that kind of train of thought, very selfishly. But I'm sure the listener will get loads of gold from it as well. So just kind of thinking about how we can share some of these things with others in our team to get the best out
Mhm.
of them. Is there, is there any examples or go-to methods that you would do that you can help people listening and go, and actually that's really going to be really helpful for me? And I know this, me explaining this to other people in my organization will be helpful. Is there any kind of advice that you could offer or to those people to say, how do we get the best out of others in the team?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. The first thing I'm just going to say is I'm going to challenge you a little bit, not to
Okay.
say when you say selfish, replace that with self-led.
Okay.
Okay.
Self-led. Yeah.
So when you
I
said,
use self-care as my,
yeah,
yeah, but yeah. Okay. I
so
like
when you
that.
said I'm being a bit selfish with this conversation,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, to say,
Self-led. I
yeah,
like that.
self-led.
I'm,
Um,
I'm gonna,
and
I'm gonna
yeah,
borrow that. Thank you.
you're welcome. But yeah, with when you're working with a team or other professionals or clients and you want to help them get the most out of them and your relationship, the first thing I would say is, are you willing to invest in them? Because you have to invest in the person to get the relationship right. And the relationship, remember, is where the magic happens. So, in order to create safety, and so where vulnerability is tolerated or accepted, I need to create a space of safety. In order to create safety, I need to understand the person. I need to invest in getting to know them. And so if you can come with that approach, this is where good communication skills come in. Thinking about the language that you're using and the way that you're using it with people. Um, Noticing and not interpreting. Okay, is a really big one because often we interpret what people do or say and we attach our own meaning to it rather than just checking out. So getting some clarity about, what does that mean when you say that, or what was going on for you, you know, um, and I think in another kind of podcast, I used the analogy of someone going up to the water cooler, and just taking a lot of time but at the water cooler. Now, you might interpret that, watching that, if you're observing that person, you might interpret that behavior as that they don't want to do any work, or that, they're bored, or that, something. We can make meaning of that when actually, if it would be better to just say, I noticed that you've spent a bit more time at the water cooler today. What's going on for you? Or how has your day been? You know,
Mm.
those type of conversations, because actually it might be that they were just really thirsty.
Yeah.
It might be that, that they were getting a bit overwhelmed and having a cold glass of water helps to ground them. It might just be that they're really fed up with what's going on, or they've got stuff going on at home, or there's a whole plethora of stuff that could be going on for that person. But rather than running with what we are interpreting it as, just notice it and then offer that back. This is where, you're investing in that person, you're opening up space for them to be more authentic with you. That is going to create better relationships. And within better relationships, we are getting the best out of people and also ourselves.
No, I love that. I love that. And it's that Stephen Cove that when I was listening to you, that the first time I heard the audible version of Stephen Covey's highly effective 7 habits of highly effective people.
Mm.
And he opens with that. He was on a situation on a train. Did you know this?
No,
He's on
I'm
a
gonna have to look at it now.
situation. Sorry, yeah.
No,
Well,
no, no,
I might ruin it for you, and I might ruin it for
no, no,
listeners.
no, you
But
go.
he was talking about a situation when he was on a train and there was a child running around and the parent was doing nothing, and he was getting mad, and all the people on the train were getting
Mhm.
um, a bit frustrated with this kid, unacceptable behaviour, and he was looking at the dad, and the dad was doing nothing, and then so he just turned around and went, "Excuse me, I've noticed your child is like causing havoc." And the dad turned around and went, "Yeah, really, really sorry. Just come back from the hospital. Mum's just passed away. I haven't got the foggiest clue what to do or what to say to him." All of a sudden, it went from almost an anger in sort your child
Mhm.
out to, "What do you need me to do to help you?"
Right. Hmm.
It was that you never really know what's going on inside someone's world until you lean into
Yeah.
curiosity
Yeah.
and just be curious. It's always stuck with me from the very first time. And when I was listening to you saying that, that's the story that is the kind of that
Yeah.
part of me
Yeah.
appeared again, and I just went, oh yeah. And I think and it's really, really powerful, that, isn't it?
Really powerful, yeah. So just even that moment of connection where that guy came up to the other one on the train and just said, "What's going on, with your child?"
Yeah.
Whatever, however he said it. Just, I mean, you have to make a connection with someone to have a conversation. So just in that initial connection, the conversation can be had, but that's the investment.
Yeah.
Rather than, that passenger just getting frustrated with the child and making passive aggressive comments, which is often sometimes
Yeah.
the
Oh,
case,
yeah.
because people avoid conversations that they feel will be not well received or could be awkward. But I would argue that no conversation is awkward if you're coming from that place of, being quite grounded in yourself, and just being able to communicate, you know, could I just, inquire like what is going on, or,
Mhm.
you know, how are you experiencing your child running around?
Yeah.
Because again, we don't know what is going on for the child or the parent. And that, it doesn't have to be a child and parent. It could just be the person sat next to you on a train.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going on for them until you invest, and the investment can be time, emotion, like it doesn't matter in what capacity the investment is, but if you're going to invest in that person and just be curious and then have the courage to entertain a conversation through connection, then you're on to a winner.
Wow. Well, what we're going to do, I'm not going to ask any more questions around that. We're going to move into a little advice because I think that's such a powerful way to kind of to summarize that. So if I could, I'm going to say quick fire. You don't have to answer them quickly. You're all right. It's just these are structured.
Pressure.
They're just structured questions that are done.
Yeah.
So uh, there's probably loads already we've talked about. So just curious if you could pick 3 practical things that people
Mhm.
could try today to either optimize themselves or optimize their communication with their team,
Yeah.
what would they be?
So the first thing I would say is notice, don't interpret. And
Yeah.
that same Same goes for you. If you're noticing something happening in you, don't interpret what's going on. Don't think of the answer. Just ask it.
Yeah.
What is like this feeling that I'm having, this sensation or this thought? Like, what is that? Don't notice, don't interpret. Um, I would say be willing to invest in, in the other person and in yourself. Because again, it's not just about who we're in relationship with, but it starts with us. Um, and oh, what else would I say? What was the what, oh, I would say get to know your own needs and create boundaries accordingly.
Perfect.
So yeah, just understanding what are your needs and how are you going to meet them. Don't expect someone else to meet your needs.
Yeah.
You have to do it for you first. And then this is where your boundaries can come in. So boundaries are really important.
Brilliant. One principle that you wish every leader understood.
Um, One principle that I wish people really understood is the value of compassion and curiosity. Um, yeah, because if you can have compassion and curiosity and hold them in equal measure, then you're
Oof.
going to be able to invest.
Yeah.
And if you can invest in someone, you're winning. If they feel valued by you, you're creating the conditions for that relationship to be optimized.
And I guess the same could apply to self.
Yep.
Have compassion for yourself and
Oh,
curiosity for yourself.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. It all starts with you.
Loving this. Right. So we've had, how do we then, so people listening, there's been, I put, how do we turn insights into action? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how many insights have been in this? And I can't wait to listen to this. But so how, what would be some advice then around people listening who've listened to some of this and to start taking action? What would some action points be if they're
Mm-hmm.
struggling to kind of do that for themselves?
Yeah, so action points could be things like if you, I think connecting with your environment can also help you connect with yourself. And what I mean by that is you're in the natural world. So even if you're just getting out for a walk, you have to go for a run, you have to go full extreme and get, yourself
Don't
to
do
the
it
gym.
running.
But just move your body. Just literally move your body. Movement is really, really powerful, and I think we underestimate it. Um, if you can afford to get yourself into some kind of therapy or coaching somewhere where you're going to have that relationship um, to create those conditions that you can then model in the outside world.
Nice.
Because it's really hard to do this in isolation. It's hard to just sit with yourself and know what to say and what to do. Like you need someone to help guide you with that. So if you can access that, I would definitely recommend it. Um, and I think I think something really important is to have courage. Because all of this takes courage, and by courage I mean the desire and the want to actually know yourself. Because we're often afraid, these, parts of us are afraid to get to know other parts
Yeah.
because they often hold what we believe the system, these wounds will overwhelm us. And actually, we spend a lot of time trying to avoid them.
Okay.
But just like that toddler analogy,
Yeah.
it just gets louder and louder, and it will present itself in more and more ways until you finally pay it some attention. So have some courage yeah. Relationships are really important. So we're not designed to be on our own. We are tribal, we are designed to be in a community. The human race didn't survive in isolation. We survived through community. So having some sense of community around you, and finding a place of not fitting in, at belonging because they're two very different things.
I like
Um,
that.
and I would always go for belonging over fitting in.
Wow.
Because for me, fitting in is like trying to fit, you're trying to change shape to
Yeah, that
fit. Yeah, so it's like a round peg in a square
that's
hole.
how I interpreted that. So I'm glad you, added some context to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas belonging is I am acceptable as I am and I belong in
Yeah.
this community.
Yeah. I like that. Wow. Before we do our final wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
Um, no, I hope that it sparks some curiosity for people.
I think it's been amazing. I mean,
So,
it's, my self-ledness has definitely has loved this. So for those that are interested and follow you, um, where can people find you? Where do you hang out?
so I am
Within your
on
boundaries, obviously.
within my boundaries. I am on Instagram, the Rosemay Practice, LinkedIn, Sarah Davies, Rosemay Practice. My website is www.therosemaypractice.com. Um, and I think that's
Have you
most.
not got a podcast coming up?
I
Not
have, yeah.
okay.
So there will
Do you
be a
want to plug that?
series. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So, myself and Richmond, who
Yeah.
kindly introduced us, we have got a series coming up.
Okay.
And so it will be an episode, one episode kind of, I'm not sure if we're going to do it weekly or fortnightly,
Okay.
but it will be all around stuff like this. So
Awesome.
curiosity and compassion and motivation and agenda and all of these things that are transferable skills, I guess, is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So not necessarily therapeutic stuff, but the tools that I use in therapy, you can transfer them and use them in your relationships, whether it's at work, if you're a team leader or a professional, or you want to grow yourself because parts of you are holding you back. Um, yeah, or if you're a parent, it could be transferred to anybody.
And that's what I love about human skills. If you they can be, can't they? And I think that's what's so
Yeah.
powerful about these conversations, and I love them. My next what are you working on next? Is it just a podcast? Have you got anything else coming up?
Good
Oh,
question. So
oof,
yeah, so I have obviously my
exclusive.
yeah, I have my private practice, which is where I see my clients. So that's individual work and group work. And I do supervision and reflective practice groups for professionals as well. So that
Ah,
might be something that might interest people.
yeah, definitely.
Um, and then the podcast series, which will be coming soon. And then I'm also working on kind of workshops for
Nice.
other professionals that want to optimize, I'm going to use your word, themselves, and they're the team that they're working with. So how to get the
Oh,
most out of you and your team with all of these transferable skills. So it's the
oh,
same
brilliant.
kind of stuff, but yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, what we'll do is as and when they're live, then we can add them to the show notes as well so people can find you. So that's brilliant. Final thing, one challenge I'd like to set the audience. So what we always try and do as a guest is to one final challenge that you can set the audience. So what
Mm.
challenge will you set these listeners?
Okay, the challenge that I'm going to set is next time you have a thought, feeling, or sensation, okay, just notice it and let that part of you know that you've noticed it. And then just see what happens. And that's all I'm going to ask them to do because if I set massive challenges, people won't do it. So
No,
I'm going
no,
to
no, no.
start small.
Sarah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you ever so much. And for everyone listening, thank you so much too.